Welcome to Rewired Sober, the podcast that breaks down the real reasons women turn to alcohol. Spoiler alert, it wasn't a character flaw. It was your neurobiology, your conditioning, and the systems that taught women to silence themselves instead of support themselves. I'm your host, Kate Vitella. I've been a registered nurse for well over 2 decades, trained in addiction and mental health, a bit neuroscience obsessed, but spiritually grounded. This is the science and soul work of a woman's recovery, where I help you understand what's happening in your sober brain and reconnect to that deeper inner truth you've always had, that soul level knowing, the intuition the patriarchy has tried to train out of you. When women combine the science of the brain rewiring with that inner knowing, you stop feeling broken and you start feeling powerful. So let's get into it. Welcome back to another episode of Rewired Sober. Today's conversation is for the woman who got sober and then they quietly started asking themselves bigger questions like, why am I still afraid to trust myself? Why does questioning feel like betrayal? Why do I feel like I'm performing recovery? So my guest today is Kirsten, known online as the Sobriety Bestie and the host of Sobriety Bestie podcast. Her work centers around deprogramming AA culture. You can already tell this is going to be a good episode. Reclaiming your identity, autonomy, and inner authority after long-term immersion in 12-step spaces. Kirsten spent 10 years in AA and has been out of it for around 5 years. And what I respect most about her is that her voice is very reflective on this. It is not reactionary, and it's thoughtful, and it's honest. And so before we hit record, I was just telling her that I think she's really brave for speaking her truth like this, because we're going to be talking about topics like dogma and loaded language that you'll hear in 12-step spaces and fear-based thinking. I mean, I call some of the stuff they talk about in 12-step folklore. I don't know. Anyway, let's get started. I'm so excited because I have so many questions and I just feel like you're already my sobriety bestie. So welcome, Kirsten.
Well, a bestie tells you the truth, right? Even if it's hard. Ooh. And so that's the vibes. It's like, what would if I had a bestie when I was leaving AA or when I was getting sober or when I was struggling with alcohol, like what would they actually say to me? Not what you're supposed to say, not what the mainstream narrative is, but what's the actual like real truth. And that's why I like your work, because it's about like recognizing how much self-betrayal and self-abandonment like we've been living in as women like our entire lives, or me also as someone who's neurodivergent, just being kind of either othered or gaslit or told that made to feel a type of way or shamed or whatever. And then that gets repeated again in 12-step ideology where, you know, we're made to feel I used to think it was self-help, it's self-diminution. Do I say that word right? Where it's making yourself less important. It's about betraying yourself and abandoning yourself. And when I got sober, I didn't need to abandon myself anymore. I needed to raise up into my power. I had already been there, done that. I had dealt with a lot of sexual trauma, especially at a young age. I had dealt with like anxiety disorders and all sorts of stuff. So when I got sober, I needed to be lifted back up, not put down. I didn't need to get out of self. I needed to find myself, to get into self. I need to recognize what are my needs. And like, I matter. And like, where's my voice and all these things. So I love what you're doing, because I feel like it gets at the root of like what a lot of us, what it really means to recover. And for some of us, it's not even recovering because we never had that to begin with, right? So it's really about stepping in, like discovering who we are and stepping into our power as women who don't drink like harmfully anymore.
Yeah. Wow. Mic drop already. Okay. So I'm going to tell you and the audience briefly about my deprogramming journey, and I mean very briefly. And then I was hoping you could kind of do the same. Just give us a high-level overview, give us context of where we are now. So I went to AA every day for the first 2 years of sobriety. I was one of those people that went maybe twice a day. Of course, my sponsor, you do 90 meetings in 90 days. You never miss a day, all the things. So, and the interesting thing about you and I is when I was researching on your information, you had said somewhere that you quit going to AA in April of 2020. And that is also when I quit going to AA, because this little thing happened in the world called the pandemic, and all the live meetings shut down. And so I had no choice but to look elsewhere. So the pandemic hit and I was forced to look outside of those rooms. And also there was this strong feeling bubbling up inside of me that this isn't right. There's got to be more. And I started working in psychiatric settings. I'm a psychiatric nurse. And then I started learning about the ways that we actually really talk about addiction. And that's when I started thinking, God, this is folklore. The shit people are saying. Okay. Then I quit calling myself an alcoholic. I quit going to 12-step. But it wasn't until recently, maybe in the last year or so, that I finally stood up and said, I don't call myself an alcoholic, and I'm not buying into that shit anymore. And I've lost some friends recently because I have a lot of friends that were 20 years into 12-step. And my husband says it really, really nicely. He says it's a type of group where if you're not with them, you're against them. And so that's where I'm at. Now, your turn.
Yeah, well, I know exactly what you're saying. Unfortunately, it's super relatable. That is what it is. We don't really get to take these friends with us from 12-step. There's nobody that I know from AA. I was there for 10 and a half years. And there's nobody that I was friends with in AA. And I had a lot of friends in AA. I do air quotes for friends, right? The only people that I currently have in my life from AA are people who also left and began their deprogramming journey. And that's just kind of what it is. And we know that when we're in AA, right? We know that when somebody leaves, they're dangerous. That's their disease talking. They're a ticking time bomb. We're given all this doomsday prophecy because that's part of the ideology that AA is the only way. It's the safe way. It's the system. Anybody outside of the system was either never part of the system or they're about to get drunk, right? So they're dangerous essentially. So we kind of know that when we leave, but it's one thing to intellectually understand something and it's another thing to experience the shunning, the what feels like a betrayal for a lot of us. And for me, it was the biggest, can I swear here?
You can absolutely, if you don't swear, then I would think you're weird.
It was the biggest mind fuck of my life to leave Alcoholics Anonymous because I was like, okay, I think I'm going to die because that's what I was told for 10 and a half years. I think I'm going to die. It's not safe to leave, but something inside me is saying that this is all baloney. For me, it's mythology, exactly as you say. Now I call it bullshit. It's all bullshit. And so I got Bill-boozled, if you will, and I'm not going to live a lie. And even if I'm walking into this is where I got when I left AA. I would rather walk into my death with my integrity intact than live a freaking lie. So I know that it's over. For me, the way that I found out that AA was mythology was kind of analogous for a horrific example, but September 11th. The towers of AA burned suddenly in my mind and they were gone. Or it was like when I woke up to the reality about Santa, it was like, boom, it's over. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. So it wasn't about, do I stay or do I go? It was a boom. In a second, it was over. And then it was just about having to rewire myself, as your work, all about, so that I could move forward. But I thought I was going to die. All of a sudden, my friends were no longer around, and I was going through a dark night of the soul. Because like everything I had lived, I was literally on Bill Wilson's grave crying, thanking him for my life and saying, thank you for channeling the steps from God. Come to find out he took them from the Oxford group that he got sober. And the whole mythology of the origin story is like a lot to unpack. I'm like, wait, he didn't channel the steps from God? No, he literally took them from the Oxford group where he got sober in the Oxford group religion for 2.5 years. And then I think they got, like in Lois's diary, his wife, it says they got kicked out. I think he was, 13th step is named after Bill, right? His predatory behavior in the rooms. And so I'm not really sure. It's kind of confusing, like why he left the Oxford group, but he rebranded it as AA and then rewrote the steps as his own. And then that's how AA started. So I had this whole mythology I believed about how it even started. I thought they did trial and error and saw what worked, looked around at modern science or something, and then put together a best practices. No, it was literally always religious steps. And in hindsight, it's so obvious. And there's nothing wrong with religion, but coerced religion. Nobody wants to be coerced into somebody else's religion. Even religious people don't want to be coerced into somebody else's religion. But it's about, like, step 12 is proselytizing, evangelizing, recruiting. Step 11 is quiet time with God. There's atonement for your sins or your resentments. There's turning your will and your life over to God. They're all literal religious steps and have nothing to do with, as you know, modern neuroscience, which we didn't even know about brain science. I saw one of your clips just now. We didn't even know about neuroscience until about 10 years after the big book of AA was published. We literally didn't know the brain can change. Turns out AA says your brain is like a pickle. It's a cucumber, and at a certain point in your drinking, you go to a pickle, and then you're always an alcoholic for life. And so you get this locked-in, learned helplessness, and then you get a lifetime sentence to Bill's religion where you have to do free labor exploitation, meaning you have to like give your time to the cause, sponsor people, service commitments, whatever. But actually, the science of Sinclair method is mind-blowing. Where it shows that the cucumber, the pickle, can become a cucumber again. We could unlearn the pattern of drinking in our brain through pairing naltrexone an hour before drinking. And I'm like, yo, wouldn't that have been cool? I wish that was known about in 2009 when I got sober, because they knew about that science then, but it wasn't mainstream because the AA ideology is so pushed into through all the propaganda campaigns. It is so embedded in the institutions and mainstream narrative that we don't even know that it's not safe, that it's not effective, and that it's actually harmful. And that's the reality.
Yeah, you've said so many good things here. First of all, I'm just picturing you one of those people that goes to Akron, Ohio.
I did. That was me. It was me.
Oh, I love that so much.
2018 Founders Day with my sponsee, Akron, Ohio.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, yes. You were so that bitch. And
True
I love
believer vibes.
I love that for you.
Culted up. I was culted right in.
I'm loving that for you. And for those of people who are listening who've never been indoctrinated into AA, this might not be that funny, but if you've been to some AA meetings, you've met those people that sit in there day after day for 20 years or what, all the things, and they say things like if you leave the rooms you'll die, and then there's this massive reverence for Bill W. and, like you said, the steps. Okay, so I want to ask you about this because I have even said, I feel like because it was taught to me that they were divinely guided. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I did not know they were kind of plagiarized. I thought it was like he got this omen from God, and then that's where they were written. Is that right or no?
And that's like the mythological origin story that you commonly see in cults. That the cult leader has this spiritually enlightened revelation, God moment or something, channel some wisdom from God, and that's a text then that can never therefore be changed because the cult leader channeled it from God or something mythological like that. I mean, that's common across cults. If you look at what in the Oxford group, they have like 6 core tenets, and it's those tenets. Bill was taking a train from New York to Akron or something. He rewrote them and he made them as 12 instead of 6 because he said he didn't have a high view of us. I mean, or people who struggled with alcohol addiction, he called them alcoholics. He said they try to wiggle and wrangle their way out of anything. So we got to tighten up these principles. So he made the 6 ones into 12 to make them a little more tight so that people couldn't wiggle their way out of them. So they're more controlling essentially. And they come directly from the Oxford group. And interestingly enough, Dr. Bob, who is the co-founder of AA, right? He was in the Oxford group with Bill after he met Bill for 4 years. And so even after the big book was written in 1939, the co-founder was still in the Oxford group. So there was no AA in the beginning. It kind of like Founders Day is a lie. It counts it as 1935 when it founded. There was no AA then. Like, it's just not even real. This stuff isn't real. And so I'm like, oh, and then I wonder why. So then it goes like, well, why did they lie? Is it just to try to like give some street cred? Is it like better? And this is not like, I have a book over here. This is written by like an AA true believer. He's still an AA. It's called Writing of the Big Book. And he talks in here about how Bill was, he doesn't say the word lie. He uses like a myth maker, a mythological storyteller. He didn't really vibe with the truth, those kind of words. So it's not like, it's easy to find this out. The thing is that when we're in AA, we don't look, right? I wasn't digging and I wasn't looking at what they call outside literature. So
no outside literature.
Right. And so that's what cults do. They want to confine your thoughts, your information, your inputs. And so they limit what you're allowed to look at. Now, it's not direct. I was never told you can't ever Google anything. But the culture is such that I never looked at modern addiction science when I was in AA. I never looked at other recovery paths. And I never looked into the AA origin story because I had no reason to believe it was mythology.
And it's funny, right? Because it's only funny because I was so scared to leave. And it took time and layers. It's even a little frightening for me to have this conversation right now. Like, I've been so conditioned.
Why is it frightening?
That I will be burned at the fucking stake. Like the witches of Salem, right? It was so ingrained in me. But certainly I'm having these conversations now, and it's happening. But what I don't want to do is spend all our time ripping on another organization, because we've both come to know so many ways you can heal outside of that. And so I do, not to be Pollyanna, but I do want to talk about the ways we've grown and learned from this experience, and some of the changes that we've made. Because we could literally talk forever about how fucked up AA is. And it would be funny.
I don't see it as talking about how fucked up AA is, and I don't see it as ripping AA. I see deconstructing AA to be the most empowering and liberating journey I have ever been on. Really? And so I don't see it as a negative thing. I see it literally as the most freeing thing I've ever done for myself. The most courageous thing I've ever done in my life is leave Alcoholics Anonymous. It was harder for me to leave AA than it was for me to get sober, and alcohol almost killed me. So the number of people who are unaliving themselves inside Alcoholics Anonymous because they are believing the mythology as fact, and that don't make it out, that can barely leave, or that don't actually make it once they leave because they're still believing the rhetoric in their head, my heart goes out to these people. So I found out a year after I left AA in 2020 that I'm autistic. And I found out 4 years after I left AA that I'm also ADHD. I know that, like me, 9 out of 10 autistic girls are sexually abused by the time they're 18. That's 3 times more than typical girls. And then autistic women are 13 times more likely to die by suicide than non-autistic women. And so when I deconstruct AA ideology and I call out what is true and verifiable and valid, I do not see it as ripping on anything. I see it as validating people, especially autistic women is where my heart really goes, who have been gaslit and have been taught to gaslight themselves their entire life and are going through a radical transformation where they are learning to be self-empowered, trust themselves, think critically. And that is like the hugest revelation. Like when we talk about a recovery revolution, it is about trusting yourself, in my opinion. So I understand that people perceive me like all types of way, and people get very offended when you speak against something that they believe very dearly. But this conversation is very important as well. And it is not hateful. It is not resentful. It is not bitter. It is not angry. It is about validating and supporting people who realize that they've been living in a mythology and are trying to figure out the truth, because society still believes that narrative. And it could be one of the most destabilizing things a person ever goes through. It deserves a voice. We can own our stories. We can speak our truth. And that's how I feel. I feel like it's incredibly empowering and liberating. And I don't hate AA. I am not anti-AA. I don't want it to go away. But if we can't tell the truth about a harmful system, that's not us being harmful. That's the system being harmful. But because the mainstream narrative is so much like AA is sacred and a third rail, a holy grail or whatever that you can't touch, a sacred cow, it's like, no, bro, any system that's harming people systematically can be talked about. And if we... Safe groups, so the way that they define, like differentiate safe groups from high control groups versus cults, safe groups allow all feedback. They want to know the feedback because they want to get better. So I'm really, these days, I've been speaking up for the people who are feeling crazy, who are told that they are crazy, who are wondering if it's feeling like they're going to pick up again because they were told they were. That becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like, no, you are so freaking powerful. No, it is not true. It is not dangerous. You may need more support. I needed therapy for 6 months when I left AA to help me get some of AA out of my head. To me, AA in my head was dangerous, not leaving AA. A lot of people leave AA and don't deprogram. And for me, that would have been a mistake because I keep regaining more pieces of myself. The shame and the fear conditioning go so deep. The guilt can run really deep too. And we deserve a healing. We deserve to know that, no, we can trust ourselves. Yeah, it is a kind of a nut system. It's okay if you're still in AA. And it's okay if you left and you're questioning. It's okay to be who you are.
Yeah, wow. Well, thank you for that. Like, you kind of put me in my place, but I'm loving it because I have a tendency to go, like, I joke a lot and then I go Snarkosaurus Rex. But you're right. You are right. Like, we should be able to talk about all this because part of the deprogramming and the healing, not to sound corny, but is to be able to call it out. These are harmful systems and they're gaslighting the fuck out of people. They're scaring people. Okay, I'm really interested in, I've seen your work talking about the gaslighting in particular of your neurodivergence, because I think it's really important that we talk about that it was sort of pathologized. So much of AA like, if you don't follow suit exactly how they want it to be, then they pathologize that against you. That's your disease. That's because you're in denial. You're fucked up. All the things. It's my favorite, your defect of character. For folklore. But what was your experience and how did you get through this as a woman who's neurodivergent?
Yeah. So I always knew I was different. And that's part of why AA was clicking in for me. Also, when I was in early sobriety, I told my sponsor, I think I'm ADHD. Like, I was having all the symptoms and they were really bad in early sobriety. I was also coming off of benzos. I'd been on Klonopin twice a day with my psychiatrist for anxiety. So they took me off those in rehab. And so I got sober in 2009. So the first 2.5 years of my sobriety, I was just having like one long anxiety attack. It felt like coming off benzos, post-acute withdrawal syndrome, had no coping skills for my dysregulated nervous system. I was autistic and ADHD and didn't know it. Unresolved trauma. I had a lot of trauma that I had kind of tried to like pretend it didn't happen, like especially with like sexual abuse. And so I had a lot going on, but I had all the symptoms of ADHD and they were flaring up really bad. And I told my sponsor, I think I'm ADHD. And she said, no, the only problem you have is alcoholism. And the only one problem you ever have is alcoholism. And the only solution you're ever going to need is the 12 steps. And I realized that that's an individual experience, right? So that's not what everybody experiences. But I didn't even know that I should go get outside help or assessments because everything was framed as alcoholism and ADHD.
Yes.
And people who are ADHD are 6 times more likely to develop, well, the stats vary, but there's a lot of different studies, but they're about 6 times more likely to develop alcohol use disorder if you're ADHD, something about the dopamine deficiency or seeking out dopamine or wanting to self-medicate through something like alcohol. So that was definitely me. And so I didn't have a frame. And then also when I was 90 days sober, a guy got up, he told my story in an AA meeting. He was more than twice my age. He was the opposite like gender, the opposite sexual orientation, the opposite race, the opposite, everything was opposite on the outside, right? Couldn't have been more different from me just on the outside visually. But he got up and he talked about his thinking, his feeling, his sensing, how we perceived the world, how we felt, how we socialized. And then he said, and this is all alcoholism. And I had never had anybody describe my entire inner world before, even articulated it more clearly than I could myself. And I was like, well, if all of that is alcoholism, I'm 100% exactly what he said. But now, after leaving AA, deprogramming, studying autism like crazy, going way down the rabbit hole of neurodivergence, I'm like, bro is autistic and probably ADHD. So now I can see what I was relating to inside the rooms of AA that was being brought, like branded as alcoholism or untreated alcoholism or dry drunk or any of these things. It was actually unrecognized neurodivergence. So I was identifying so deeply with these people who were talking about ADHD, but calling it alcoholism. So what does that end up doing? It ends up having me doing nightly inventories on my so-called character defects, which are actually neurodivergent traits, yes, and praying away my autism, praying away my ADHD. It's like good fucking luck. How demoralizing is that? It's not something to pray away. It's something to understand. And, I've improved my brain more. I'm not in early sobriety anymore, so I'm recovered from alcohol use disorder a long time ago. I mean, it was 2009 was like a hot minute ago, right? This is like olden days. I'm getting old up in here. But I have improved my brain, my so-called character defects, which now I know are more like my neurology, through nutrition, through light therapy, through movement, than the steps were ever going to do to me, because it was really about detoxifying my body, healing my gut, giving the right nutrients into my brain. Like I'm on the keto diet, so I run on ketones instead of glucose, which makes my brain much more efficient. I have the right supplements. I make sure I get light. I do light therapy, like a red light panel, biohacking stuff, infrared sauna. So when I treat myself at like a cellular level and understand my brain, I can then improve my brain. There is no God required. There's no spiritual malady. There's none of this mumbo jumbo in AA, but I actually can move forward in my life and go all in on my strengths that aren't character defects. I mean, I was literally praying away some of these traits, and then understand areas where I have challenges so I can actually forgive myself for not being as organized, maybe as some other people, or the typical ADHD things, right? Yeah. But there's pros and cons of all of it. So having the right frame, and again, I will not identify as autistic or ADHD. My identity is never going to be placed on a label that's in a manual from the government or anything. Again, I've been there, fucking done that. Turns out alcoholic isn't even in the manual. It's real alcoholic isn't a thing.
It's not a word.
And that's, I think, why I wanted to, I don't care how anybody else views me or perceives one talking about AA. But for me, it's important to say that I'm not bashing AA. I'm not tearing down an institution. I'm speaking up for the people like me who deserve better, who are in a system that is inherently shaming them, and they're relating to it because it's the wrong framework, and they're never going to leave, and they're never going to get better. And these autistic women are 13 times more likely to die by suicide. And some of those are in AA believing that narrative. So I'm kind of like, we have to tell the truth. So I'm sharing what I believe is the truth as I know it now. And my truth evolves. So what I'm saying isn't like the ultimate truth, obviously. But like you, I've done all this research on modern brain science, modern addiction, understanding of things. And it's like, whoa.
Yeah, once you start doing your own research, AA seems more and more like folklore, and then you can't unsee. You can't, once you know it, you can't go back. Like, you just can't. And for me, it's almost comical. Like, it's laughable, the stuff that we were saying in those rooms and the stuff that I was believing. And I will say my deprogramming journey has been such that even when I first started coaching, even though I would encourage women to don't call yourself an alcoholic. Do, if you like, call yourself whatever you want, right? I wasn't very dogmatic. I would still resort to things like, well, let's make a list of our resentments. And I was kind of going at it in that sense. And you know how many people, so I coached several women in the beginning where I would offer them this exercise of listing all their resentments and their part in it. Hello, AA. And you know how many of them actually did it? 0. And the ones that did were like, this is fucked. And that right there taught me so much about what women really need. And I was like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this exercise? Oh, because that's what AA taught me to do. But it's not freaking helpful. Because guess what? Half that shit isn't even, it's not your fault, right? Quit eating all the blame all the time. It's one more area where you don't trust yourself. You suck. You failed. You did it. Anyway, that whole exercise of trying to get women to do that and then realizing they were like, no, that really showed me like, okay, this is not the approach, you know? Right. And I love that you talk about loaded language in your materials. And I've heard you talk about it on your podcast, and the ways that AA uses various language to, it just beats you up. So I was curious if you would kind of elaborate on that. Quick pause here, folks. If you're liking this content, did you know that I go live once a week in a group coaching setting? The Rewired Sober Now What is a 3-month integration program. I would love to meet you live and let's talk about all the things. If you've stopped drinking and you're quietly thinking, okay, well, now what? This might be for you. It's for women only who are already sober. Now, this can be anywhere from a few weeks to a couple years. You put down the drink and you want more than just not drinking. This isn't one of your typical quit alcohol programs. It's not about willpower, rules, or starting over. It's about integration. We focus on stabilizing your nervous system, understanding what's actually happening in your brain in sobriety, and doing the grounded inner work that helps you trust yourself again, emotionally, relationally, and day to day. So if you're sober, you're still feeling a little unsettled, maybe your emotions are louder than you expected, or maybe you're just unsure how to grow into this version of yourself without white knuckling or performative sobriety. Ugh. That's your now what moment. And that's exactly what this phase in the program is built for. And I would love to meet you live. You can learn more at the link in the show notes or head on over to Rewired Sober social media and you'll see link in the bio there. Now back to the show.
Yeah, well, the idea that you have a fatal progressive disease, and it's not an idea, it's not a fact, right? Although I believe that for the 10 and a half years I was in AA, basically. So that's called learned helplessness, where you can never get better. Yep. And maybe what helped in the beginning isn't needed later on, but you're stuck and tethered to it because you don't even question it. It's just become your new normal. So yeah, in the cult research, there's someone named Robert J. Lifton who in like 1950, he was like OG cult guy. He came up with the 8 criteria for thought reform. So thought reform is the term that he used then. It's also what is synonymous essentially with brainwashing or mind control. It all kind of means the same thing. And so one of his 8 criteria is what's called loaded language, as you said. And so all those little phrases when I got to AA that sounded really annoying until I embodied them, and because you hear them enough and then you start to believe them and repeat them and then live them, then they become your reality. So whether it works if you work it. So at the end of every meeting, we'd hold hands and we'd say, it works if you work it, right? And so it works if you work it is part of the propaganda. It's part of the loaded language. The reality is we can look at science to see what works and what doesn't, and we can validate it through data. Like my background is I have a master's in statistics. So I've studied psychology and statistics, and then I went into like doing statistical analysis like on big data and stuff and tech startups. So I'm always interested, even though I got like totally brainwashed in AA and kind of abandoned my rational critical mind, right? But so now as somebody who's been deprogramming and on that journey, I'm like, well, what does the science say? What do the statistics say? So it's not it works if you work it. It's like, well, let's see what actually happens here. So when I've looked at the data, and different studies are going to vary, and they're going to have different things that might make them more valid than others, depending upon how they source the data or different parameters or variables or whatever. But AA seems to work if we're only looking at abstinence for a year as a valid measure of it works, which is already questionable, right? There's other ways to know that it works. I think if you learned how to regulate your nervous system, if you resolved your trauma, and if you like improved your relationships or got your career back on track, and you drank twice in that year, you've done better than if you just were abstinent and hadn't done those other things, right?
Absolutely.
So abstinent or not as a binary of success rate, to me, I think that's it's not significant. It's not relevant to our actual quality of life improving and us developing our skill set, right, to help us stay sober. So it looks like AA is about 5 to 10% successful. Most are more around 5%. It turns out that most people get sober with no treatment at all. The idea of treatment is even an indoctrination from AA ideology, this idea that we need to go to rehab or need to go to meetings. There's nothing about addiction recovery that requires people to sit in church basements or requires any of this stuff. That's literally the AA propaganda that made us believe that this is how addiction recovery works. I would argue that AA is actually not addiction recovery at all. It's a religion, and that if we were just transparent about that, I think it would be a lot more helpful. There's nothing wrong with using religion to get sober if you want to go that route, whether it's Christianity, whether it's AA, whether it's Muslim, whatever religion you want to choose, but it's literal religious steps. They say spiritual, not religious. It's like, bro, turning your will and life over to God. What are you talking about?
It's religious.
It's 12 steps to access like God. And this higher power is going to be the power that you need because you're powerless. Turns out we're not actually powerless. If we look at Dr. Sinclair's work, who came up with the Sinclair method, right? He actually has a modern medical science explanation for this so-called powerlessness that AA defines. Now, look, it was a good idea in the 1930s. Great. Good job, Bill. You had a good idea. You and Dr. Silkworth had some ideas. The problem is you thought they were truth. A bigger problem is we still today in 2026 think they're truth. But in Dr. Sinclair's work, he talks about how the brain can rewire, right? We can unlearn, like Pavlov, we can unlearn the pattern we had in our brain by blocking the opioid receptors with naltrexone. I think that's how it works. And then there's also something called abstinence something effect, where if we haven't had food in a long time, like 2 days, we might like eat really fast the next time we finally have access to food. If we haven't drank in a long time, there's this abstinent effect that happens where we're going to like do it a little bit more because we have been deprived. Oh, deprivation effect? There's something. I forget the exact terminology of it now, but that's what they see in alcohol. They showed it in rats. They show it in humans, where if you haven't had alcohol in a long time and you're abstaining from it and you actually want to drink, when you drink, you're going to tend to overdrink. Your tolerance will be different, but you're tending to overdrink the same way that you're going to tend to overeat and overdrink when you've been deprived for a while. So modern science can explain a lot of these terms that they made up in AA. And so I think it's really important for anybody deprogramming to realize that these are made up terms. They are not facts. They are not science. They never were science. None of it was ever science. It is a religion. There's no problem with going to AA, but informed consent is a vibe. To know what you're choosing, to know the pros and the cons. Let's say you tried Sinclair method. Let's say you tried Smart Recovery. Let's say you tried Rewired Sober, or like whatever programs are out there, right? And nothing worked for you. Sure, give AA a go. But there are consequences to certain paths, and there are consequences to AA. No other path that I know about do you have to deprogram after if you want to reclaim your mind. Yeah. So there's a phase 2 of recovery that, even if we want to talk about it, we're branded all these negative terms. But I think it should be just, no, you could go to AA. They're going to brainwash you. They joke about it when you get there. They'll say it's not a cult, but we need brainwashing. A lot of us hear that. But then there's the unbrainwashing period that's also important if you want to reclaim your agency, your autonomy, and all these things. So go if you want. But then after, there's another phase. It's called recovering from recovery that most other recovery paths don't have. So it's not don't go. It's understand what you're choosing, because, I had a family member like 20 years ago have a pretty serious surgery, and there was like a 5 or 10% chance they weren't going to survive it. And so they really had to think, like, do I really want this surgery on my vertebrae, right? And they went for it. And so we all prepared emotionally, like this person might die. I wrote a letter. We did this whole thing, like a ceremony almost, about what if they don't make it. That kind of 5-10% dead is like kind of feels freaky, you know? And that's called informed consent, where you get to choose the treatment you want, knowing in advance some of the complications for it. And all I think that would be fair is if that we have that on AA as well. Here are some of the complications that people tend to go through when they go through this path. Choose it. I've smoked cigarettes back in the day, but I started after we knew they were harmful. So every single cigarette I smoked way back in the day, I quit in 2010, I smoked knowing that there was a risk for lung cancer. There was a risk for all these different things. I've seen the tracheotomy pictures. So I'm not saying it was a smart choice I made, but I had informed consent. And I felt like the pros in some weird young way outweighed the cons, or that I was invincible or whatever. And I think that's only fair, is to have informed consent.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. And I kind of glazed over the conversation about the autism and neurodivergence. I didn't quite drill in like I wish I would have. And I want to go back to that because you're emotionally really hit by that. Like that was kind of traumatic, it seems like, for you. And now I see the work you're doing as a way to offer light and hope to people that are in that position. And so what are you messaging in terms of, okay, so you're a neurodivergent woman, you're in AA, or you're just getting out of AA?
A lot of people in my DMs find out that they are like bipolar type 2, and they find that being on the appropriate meds that their sponsor had told them they don't need meds, they don't need an outside evaluation, that kind of a thing, that by getting proper assessment with their mental health or their personality, so-called disorders, or with their neurodivergence, or whatever's going on with them, maybe it's a lot of us that have CPTSD, right? So, but finding out what's actually going on with us that was underneath the drinking, and maybe the drinking was serving to medicate in a way. I don't believe it's all trauma. We're all different. We all have different backgrounds and different stories. I don't believe anyone who says there's one way for everything. I'm like, it just is giving cult to me, and I won't even entertain it anymore after leaving AA, right? And so I think finding out like what's really going on with you is important. And it's probably not a lack of God. It's probably not a spiritual malady. It's probably not the problem. You know what I mean? Like I was told I have a spiritual malady and that's the root of my problem. And it turns out spirituality has nothing to do with what I was actually navigating, which was unresolved. When I got sober in 2009, it was unresolved trauma, a lack of coping skills, a dysregulated nervous system, unrecognized neurodivergence. So, and then coming off of alcohol and coming off of benzos, and the whole, like coming back to homeostasis or homeopathic recovery after getting sober. So there was a lot of balancing out I had to do in my nervous system. And because I had anxiety attacks like every day, I was very, very motivated to figure out how to feel comfortable in my skin. And I sought out every teacher I could find. I even went to India and like met with gurus and stuff. I like literally read everything because I was desperate for the panic attacks to stop. I was like, I can't drink, but I can't live like this. I can't have an anxiety attack every day. So there must be a way out. Even though all my doctors are telling me anxiety is forever, I have to like delusionally pretend that's not true because I cannot live that life. So I was pursuing this other life delusionally where I could get better from anxiety. And because I had that as my goal, I sure as fuck found a way out of the anxiety hell. It wasn't easy. It wasn't quick, but I learned how to regulate my nervous system. And this is 2010 when I didn't even know what I needed was a regulated nervous system. I didn't have any of this language. Yeah. Nobody talked even openly. This is before Instagram. Nobody was talking about sobriety, anxiety, any of this shit. We were still in the dark ages of mental health. So I was just like, my system is fried and I need to unfry it because I can't panic every day. I'm waking up with anxiety attacks and it's not sustainable. So like you, I became really interested in rewiring my system because I could see that I was getting progress, and slowly we can shift our system. So I started practicing daily these things that would calm my system down. And then when I'd panic, I'd start to practice these tools. It wasn't what I was learning in AA. I was in AA, but these were things I was learning from other teachers because I had all this other stuff going on, but I didn't have language for it. I didn't understand it. I feel like even if we don't understand conceptually what's going on with us, we all have our intuition that is guiding us. And we have that voice inside ourselves where we can listen to it. And so even if we don't get the context, we get the intuition and we could still move in that direction. And I believe that we are creative beings and there's an intelligence within us and that our bodies want to heal and that we are guided by what? By our nervous system, by a higher being, if you believe in that, by our higher self, by whatever your spirit into the direction of expansion and healing and all of that. That's like my belief system. And that's been my experience too. It's like, even though I didn't know what it was, I was still moving in that direction when I was trusting myself and I started getting better. And then I overcame all the anxiety disorders and then I started tackling my phobias. And I was like, this is about my nervous system and being stuck. So like you, I got really interested in all that work. And it's been a life changer, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a game changer for me. I would have stayed sober because if I went back to drinking, I was going to die. But I certainly would not have stayed happy, healthy, and I would not have evolved into the woman that I am today. And I love that you pointed out that you tackle each area of your struggle. You know, you come to your drinking at the intersection of neurodivergence, of trauma, of past experiences, maybe religious trauma. You know, I came in with disordered eating and anxiety. You were having panic attacks, right? We come to recovery at the intersection of all this shit. And we have to be able to break all those things down. And maybe there's different treatments for different parts of it.
It doesn't have to be overwhelming because it's seasons too, right? So my first season was, how can I feel comfortable in my skin? I need the anxiety attacks to stop. I didn't need to know about my neurodivergence at that moment.
Yeah.
I needed to learn how to like breathe and consciously relax my system and to begin to trust that. So I don't look at it as an overwhelming journey. Yes, I had a lot to work on and I still do, right? Work in progress. But it's like, what is the season I'm in right now?
So what prompted you to start this work? I mean, you were very passionate about your own deprogramming and very clearly passionate about the struggle you went through as a neurodivergent woman. And so, I don't know, around 2018, the book Quit Like a Woman came out, and it started more of a mainstream conversation around AA and how it was created for men and the limitations of AA. And still to this day, I wonder how Holly Whitaker got the fucking balls to write that book. I mean, I've said to her on a Zoom call, like, you took one for the team. You took one for the fucking team because you said the things we were all thinking, but too afraid to say. So how did you find your voice here?
So I got sober in 2009, and then I was coerced into speaking in these recovery meetings, even though I would have panic attacks and literally snot flying everywhere. And I was panicking. Waking up was giving me an anxiety attack. Okay. Public speaking. Are you kidding me? So they'd call me up to speak, and I thought I had to say yes. I'd go up and I'd speak, and I would.
Sorry to cut you off, but there's all these things they tell you you have to do. You get voluntold for service work. You have to speak. You have to sponsor. My sponsor told me that after I worked the steps, I didn't really work the steps because I didn't go on to sponsor another woman. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? I wrote journal pages after journal pages of each 12 steps. I didn't go on to sponsor another woman because I thought it was bullshit. Okay, sorry to interrupt.
So the first several times I had panic attacks and it was just overwhelming. I'm like, well, I did the steps, but I really did this other work over here. And so I started doing these groups in my living room where people would come once a week and I do a month-long course about mindfulness and anxiety and stuff. I went to coaching school and then I started coaching people with anxiety starting in 2012. And then when I moved overseas, then I moved to Bali in 2014. And so all of these little moves that I made, trusting myself to start a business, putting myself out there, starting a YouTube channel, but still being too scared to post a video. And then 6 months later, finally posting the video and then probably deleting it, right? And then moving overseas, trusting my heart and soul that it was okay to move to an island, my big dream to always move to an island. And so all these things that I was doing was me being courageous and me having the attitude of fuck fear. And that's how I really rebuilt my life. I feel like my spirit, my soul will give me little knocks about what's next for my evolution, right? Like I get these intuitive hits of the thing to do, and it's always something that scares the shit out of me.
Yes.
And it's always something I could never, ever do in a million years, except I will not betray myself.
Yep.
The only way that I can live betraying myself is if I'm drunk. I can't in sobriety betray what I know is my path. Not for very long. I have to go that way. Something inside me knows the way and I have to do it, even if it's talking about AA online, even if it's moving to an island and everyone's telling me I'm crazy, even if it's starting a business that has nothing to do with my master's degree. No matter what it is, it's like, it's so scary. So I had this feeling inside in 2017 that I was supposed to leave Bali, go to America, and to talk about childhood sexual abuse, anxiety disorders, and addiction, and connect those dots for people who don't know that those dots are there, and talk about re-victimization and talk about my healing path. And so I came to America, and I thought I was going to talk around America, do like a road trip, but I ended up getting booked at the first college I went to for a TED Talk. So I gave a TED Talk on childhood sexual abuse, anxiety disorders and declining mental health, and alcohol addiction, and then my journey out of that. And the talk is called The Secret That Almost Killed Me, because those things that I shared on that stage were things that I was never going to tell anybody about.
Yeah. Wow. Your story is so powerful, and the work you're doing, so badass. I love it. I mean, I learned something new just sitting here. I feel like I have so many more questions, and I think this is so awesome that you're offering this type of really soul level healing for people to deprogram AA. Where can people find you if they want to work with you, and do you have any parting words?
Yeah, well, I have a lot of free fun stuff at sobrietybestie.com, because you wish somebody had had the courage to share it when you really needed it. You needed to be validated, you needed to be supported, and nobody was fucking telling the truth. So you're going to be the change that you want to see. And a lot of us go on this journey and we want to bring into the world what we wish we had that wasn't there for us. Trust yourself. And if they don't get it, fine, it's not for them. You get it, you know? And I think it's just so important to honor that.
Yeah. It's hard to do. And it's come in layers of small things and big things, and being outspoken about it, and not trying to be Snarkosaurus Rex. And I want to laugh. Funny. Like, I want to make so many jokes because it gets fucking funny. I'm sorry, but AA is borderline comical, the shit we say in there.
What's the most funny? What's the most Snarkosaurus?
Just
give me one. Give me one.
If you're going to force me to...
Oh, no forcing if you don't want to say one.
No. I'm going to think of something. There's a meme that circulates on the internet, and it says hardcore AAers, and there's a picture of Ted Bundy, and and they'll be like, hardcore AAers, well, that's your alcoholism for you. Like, using alcoholism as the reason that we do all the things. And so my husband and I joke constantly around the house, well, that's your alcoholism talking, or, that's your disease. Like, we'll joke about all these different things. That's your character defects, or, you need to get right-sized. You need to be humble. All this shit. We constantly are joking about it. Yeah. So it's become so funny to me.
Yeah. And I think humor is a good part of the grieving AA. Like I said earlier on this podcast, like, I call it all bullshit. I was Bill Boozled, because I felt like when I left, I felt very angry, upset, shocked, mortified. I felt like I was conned, played, scammed. And so these are comments that I've gotten on my YouTube channel, on Sobriety Bestie YouTube. Somebody said Bill Boozled. I was like, love it. I'm obsessed. Another one was the Bill shit. I was like, I don't make these up, but Bill shittery is one of my favorite words now. And it just flies out. So it's just so accurate. It's just Bill shittery. I don't want any Bill shittery anymore. There is a new word that came about 2 days ago in my comments on Facebook that I think you would really like, which is, I saw on your Facebook, you said something about, don't mansplain my own neurobiology to me. Well, this guy is like, I'm here to teach you about AA. I was like, no mansplaining, bro. Like, I was in AA for a decade. I get it. Just like you don't need me to explain it to you. And then somebody who's deprogramming wrote underneath, mansplaining, but they did it with all lowercase, but two big A's. M, big A, little N, like AA mansplaining. Because a lot of them in my comments want to tell me how it is because clearly I don't get AA. I'm like, what? I was at the tavern where he was born. I was at his grave. I was at his house in New York. Those are in Vermont. I was at Dr. Bob's house. Like, I was drunk on the Kool-Aid. Like, I get it. I speak program ease. The problem is you don't speak deprogram ease, so you don't understand me, but I understand you because I was you. One of those, but for the grace of God, there go I. I get it. It was me. I was indoctrinating people. But
I get that too. People want to explain, well, it's this because of this. It's this. And I'm like, I'm not fucking stupid. Right? Yeah. You don't need to explain AA to me and the concepts and why we do this. And yes, there are protective factors. We're trying to protect people from going out, and I don't use the word relapse either, but I do believe there are inherently good 12-steppers out there that mean well. They do mean to protect you.
Right. However, and they're also teaching you that you have a make-believe disease and that you need to forever free labor exploit yourself through Bill's religion, but they're calling it spiritual and gaslighting you on it. They don't know that they're harming you, but they are. That's how I see it now. The people doing the harm don't realize they're harming you. And it's a lot to unpack on the flip side. There is a lot of us, like I have a whole deprogramming group. It's like an app called Deprogram Lounge. It's free. And there's people in there, the stories that I've heard, it is a lot to unpack on the backside to get AA out of your head. So the people doing the harm might seem loving and nice and kind, but they're actively programming you to be a part, like to conform, to deactivate your critical thinking, to not trust yourself, to abandon yourself. This is very harmful rhetoric that can have long-term consequences on your relationships, on how you feel about yourself, on how much money you earn. There are all sorts of ways when your self-concept is lowered systematically and over time that are incredibly damaging that you can't even really begin to see, a lot of us, until a little bit after we've left and we really started to unpack what the fuck happened to us inside the rooms. So to me, AA ideology is harmful, period. It is not a safe group. I would never tell anybody to go. If somebody is telling me they want to go, I'd say great. If they're in AA, I say great. If they say, where is it? I'd Google and tell them where it is. If they say, should I go? I say, I will never recommend it. So that's where I stand. Is I don't know what anybody else should do, but I would never tell anybody to go to AA. There's no reason to go to a harmful path when there's non-harmful paths. It just doesn't make sense to me.
It certainly doesn't make sense for women. In the beginning, you were talking about how you come into recovery having never trusted yourself and or being taught to not trust yourself. And then you get subjected to a complete beatdown. I mean, by the time I got in the rooms of AA, everyone around me had made sure to let me know what a piece of shit I was. Mm-hmm. So the last thing I needed was further beatdown. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think it really fails women, because women, they're never taught to trust themselves. And so then we start outsourcing to a higher power and to all this dogma. And then you have these bullshit men in the rooms that all of a sudden, because they've been sober longer and they can quote the big book, it's like this hierarchical ick, this bravado. I mean, my husband jokingly will hike his pants up, strut around the house and be like, that's your disease talking. And like, we die laughing. We're fucking dying laughing. Because we've both been in the rooms. And my husband is a brown man. And he's also like, why am I the only brown man in the room? I'm like, well, AA wasn't for people of color and it wasn't for women.
Yeah, it wasn't at first, and it wasn't allowed, yeah.
Anyway, we could go on forever. But again, love this. I totally appreciate your honesty and your bravery.
Yeah, I think being courage is the vibe. It unlocks everything. Like when I was a kid, they said, pot's the gateway drug. I feel like courage is the gateway emotion. It opens us up to everything. And it's how we can be authentic, and it's how we can live our purpose, is to be willing to be scared as fuck while we show up anyways for what feels right for us.
Yeah, this whole thing has been scary for me too, because I thought, who's going to be my friend? All of it is scary, 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 just like Elizabeth Gilbert says. So, okay, I do have to end it here. Thank you so much. I'm going to close this out, and I hope that people will explore your work and really find some healing in that.
Yeah, and I hope that we can all move into greater depths of self-trust.
Yeah.
myself included.
Thank you.
Thanks for spending this time with me. I love you all so very much, and I mean it. You can find me on all the socials at Rewired Sober. The links to join my coaching program are always in the show notes, as well as an email if you want to get in touch with the pod. So until next time.